Ready to read the high score and lowdown on video games. Chapter 1. Let the games begin. Once upon a time, games were played without batteries or electricity. There were classic games like chess and checkers and more recent additions like Monopoly and Clue. Many games involved rolling dice or moving playing pieces around a big board. A limited number of people could play at once, but all that changed once video games exploded onto the scene. If you want to play video games, you first need a video screen and some kind of controls. The earliest version of this machine to appear had a less than fun name of cathode ray tube amusement device. It was patented by Thomas T. Goldsmith Jr. and is still Ray Man in 1948. Players maneuvered a dot on a screen to pass over an object and then pressed a button to hit the object. The cathode ray tube amusement device was never released into the marketplace, but it is credited with receiving the first ever patent for an electronic game, not too shabby. As the 1950s began, nobody thought much about using computers to play games. Computers were used for things like crunching numbers or searching data. There was a little experimentation, though. A computerized version of tic-tac-toe called OXO was created in 1952, and a few people later programmed computers to play checkers and chess. In 1958, a game called Tennis for Two was demonstrated at Brookhaven National Laboratory in New York. Another advance came with the Space War, created in 1962. In this game, two spaceships on a small screen fired torpedoes at each other. These games were simple, but they were still great achievements for their times. Then in 1972, Roland Bushnell, Ted Dabini, and Al Arcon founded a new game company called Atari. Atari's first release was Pong, a black and white arcade game. An electronic ball bounced back and forth between two vertical lines that were meant to simulate paddles. Each paddle was controlled by a player. When one player missed the ball and it went off the court, the other player got a point. If you think this simple kind of electronic ping pong isn't very exciting by today's standards, you're right. But then in 1975, Atari released a home version of Pong that could be played on an ordinary TV. People were thrilled to have a video game they could actually play at home on their television. The next step in the evolution of the video game was creating a console that could play more than one game. Believe it or not, the Magnavox Odyssey had done just that in 1972, but it didn't gain popularity as Pong had. In 1977, Atari released a new gaming console, the Atari 2600. Each game came in its own cartridge, which you inserted into the base unit. The games used either joysticks or paddle controllers and were played in color. So now, not only could people play video games at home, but they could play them in color too. The excitement over video games continued to grow. At the time, many video games for consumers focused on moving things around a TV screen. The game Adventure, created in 1975 by Will Crowther and later enhanced in 1976 by Don Ooze, was something different. In this computer game, players explored a series of connected caves and confronted fantasy creatures and other obstacles. They moved around by typing simple commands. However, if you tried to do something that was not impossible, like use a weapon you didn't possess, the game was quick to make fun of you. This sense of humor made the computer seem alive. Chapter 2: Rise of the Archives. The first mass-market personal computers appeared in 1977. They were too expensive for most people to own. A few games, like Adventure, were available for them. The game makers concentrated on games for the arcades that were springing up in malls and storefronts. Individual arcade games were also very expensive, but the high cost was offset by the fact that people paid a quarter to play each time, and many people played the same game for hours on end. Those quarters really added up. The first big arcade hit was Space Invaders. As the game began, rows of enemy airlines descended from the top of the screen. At the bottom of the screen, you controlled a laser cannon that could move to the left or right. From there, you fired up at the advancing horde. The player's goal was to get as high a score as possible before getting obliterated by the enemy. In 1980, Pac-Man became the newest arcade craze. It involved navigating a small, round creature through a maze, watching him gobble up the little dots along the way while dodging the ghosts that were chasing him. The game was so popular, it spurred the creation of Ms. Pac-Man. The next year, a Japanese company called Nintendo introduced Donkey Kong, a platform game. Players controlled a character called Jumpman as he raced across levels of a construction site. His goal was to rescue the fair pony from a very stubborn gorilla called Donkey Kong. Jumpman was later renamed Mario. Dozens of other platform games soon appeared, and the video game business was booming. Everything seemed to be going great for video games until suddenly it wasn't. Too many home game console systems were now fighting for the public's attention. On a different front, the popularity of video cassette recorder (VCR) was surging. Having TV programs at home gave people more options for how to spend their leisure time, giving video games some serious competition. During this time, the market was flooded with some pretty terrible games that had been rushed into production. The result was a backlash against all video games. Between 1983 and 1985, many companies went out of business, devastating the industry. Chapter 3: Home Invasion. Fortunately, like the resilient characters in so many video games, the industry bounced back. In 1985, Nintendo unveiled the Nintendo Entertainment System (NES). It featured a new platform game, Super Mario Bros., which was so well received. They helped to spur sales of console. Most importantly, though, NES game cartridges now were capable of saving games in progress. This feature forever changed the whole game landscape. It figured prominently in the release of the action-adventure game The Legend of Zelda, 1987, which centered on the character Link and his quest to Rescue Princess Zelda. In 1989, Nintendo introduced the first major handheld game console, the Game Boy. This new device really shook things up. It was small and portable, yet still big enough to play adapted versions of some existing games. It was also ideal for playing a popular game called Tetris. Tetris was deceptively simple. A player had to rotate falling blocks of different shapes to create a row across the bottom of the screen. When the row was complete, it would vanish and points would accumulate. There were no characters and no story, but nobody cared. They just played and played and played. The increased storage capacity in disk called CD-ROMs also spurred improvements. The mysterious puzzle-based adventure, Myst 1993, showcased the beautiful graphics that were now possible. One new format pioneered by ID Software was the first-person shooter game. It debuted with the Wolfenstein 3D 1992, a World War II adventure, and was soon followed by Doom 1993, which added multiplayer support to the first-person perspective. In Doom, the player assumed the identity of a space marine sent to investigate a problem on a Martian moon. Intensely action-packed, this game became a runaway bestseller. By now, there were almost too many kinds of games to keep track of or even to mention here. Sports games from Electronic Arts like John Madden Football 1988 realistically simulated interactions on various playing fields. The Sim series, beginning with the Sim City, allow you to build your own city and the family and planet. As playing games with other people involved, you could all people in the same room or in different places through connections over the internet. But you were still limited to playing with the people you had arranged things with ahead of time. The two was about to change. Chapter 4 Conquering the World. While game playing was jumping by leaps and bounds, much of this progress was made possible by new advancements in video game consoles. As the 21st century began, the leading video game console was Sony PlayStation 2. Nintendo's GameCube and Microsoft's Xbox joined it the next year in 2001. New types of games continued to appear, such as Guitar Hero 2005 and Rock Band 2007. They used controllers that worked like real instruments to create musical performances. Inventive controllers were also central to 2006 Nintendo Wi-Fi. Its wireless controllers could detect physical motion as well as input from the controller buttons. It encouraged new versions of sports games that could simulate the experience of actually playing the sport. More powerful consoles and faster internet speeds signaled the next major shift in gaming. These were the massively multiplayer online role-playing games, MMORPGs. In these games, players usually sign on to subscription-based servers where they enter worlds and interact with the players here, there, and everywhere. MMORPGs include well-known brands like Star Wars and Lord of the Rings, World of Warcraft, a fantasy adventure with millions of monthly subscribers, is one especially popular example. The emergence of the smartphone heralded by the iPhone in 2007, brought more changes. New and simple games, known as applications, when they are played on smartphones or tablets, like Angry Birds 2009 and Candy Crush Saga 2012, fascinated the public. These applications were a distinct threat to home control console games. If people were playing games on their way to school or work, they might be less interested in playing more traditional games when they got home. Plus, mobile games cost only $8 or 2, unlike traditional video games which cost much more. In addition, new games such as Jenga's Farmville 2009 were widely available for free via social network sites. The game playing marketplace was changing once again. By now, there's a style of video game for almost everyone. You can play it at home, on a big screen, at an arcade in a specially outfitted chair, or on smartphone just about anywhere, except maybe the dinner table. Games may take minutes, hours, or even months to complete. Some have a simple animation, while others have complex graphics that could um, rival the latest blockbuster movie. You can play a game alone against a computer or with players from around the world. The choices may not be unlimited, but they come pretty close.